Hey, so just a quick heads up. In this episode, we do discuss fictional sexual assault as well as a couple related things. So, just in case you're not feeling up for that right now, here you go. Otherwise, here's me and Matt trying to be funny about awful things as per usual. Whew, it's been a while, huh?
Yes, it has.
Yeah, I just I got real mad at this anime. Well, I am autistic and trans, and I guess I am reeing, Matthew. That's what you do when you're autistic and you're mad at a thing, I believe.
That's a scientific term.
Yeah, that's the clinical term is you ree. My hair's not blue, so I'm not.
That'll come with time.
Yeah, it'll just set in if I get angry at enough animes or whatever.
But let's get those nerds!
Hello, and welcome to the Destroy All Nerds podcast. It's been, a tiny little bit of time, but that's how it goes sometimes. But I'm here today. I'm real mad, and Matt and I are gonna be angry, screeching SJWs for you yet again.
I would say I'm like a mumbling SJW. I mumble.
Well, you gotta work on that. I guess you're a soy boy, so
Yeah, I'm a little soy cuck.
Yeah, I gotta get that soy mumble in. You don't have the power, even though I'm pretty sure you eat tons of meat. But
well, just with the tone of my voice, I'm really excited they have NPC now because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be an NPC.
Oh heck yeah!
Just with my mannerisms and how I talk.
Just getting that blank face shooped over you sounds great. Yeah. So today the topic I'm going to start with, I've got kind of a thing I want to lead into with it. For me, is going to be the lovely anime Goblin Slayer. If you're a giant fucking dork like me, you may have heard of it in the anime realms of the internet. It's getting some discussion.
Do people like it? Is it receiving a lot of praise or?
Well, it's I'm hearing a lot of people taking the centrist position on this and going, "Oh, people are freaking out either way." Both sides are crazy. It's not that bad. But I'm seeing a lot of, and in my heart, I hope a lot of them are just dumbass teens. But I know a lot of them are probably 30. A lot of people being like, "Oh, this is it's just an adult, mature anime. You SJWs can't take that. It portrays realistic depictions of the D&D world. It has dice in the opening, and that means that
Holy guacamole!
Yeah, that means it's just showing you what D&D's really like. And I gotta say, what the fuck are your D&D games like? And I know what their D&D games are like because I've seen the kind of systems these people make after they play D&D and go, there's not enough goblin rape in this, because that's what Goblin Slayer has a lot of. It is the goblin rape anime. And I'm sure that bit, if any enterprising cringe compilation folk want to cut that, there you go, goblin rape anime. I am saying, unequivocally, Goblin Slayer is a goblin rape anime where the goblins do rape. They do sexual assault on screeching anime girls who are humiliated, even if they're a powerful wizard or whatever. They break their staff and horrible things happen. Until the manly man of the anime comes in and rescues them with his swords and his goblin knowledge.
I mean, from what I saw, just the brief snippet, and then I closed it. It was very cutesy and kind of traditional cutesy anime, and I was like, oh, this is kind of inappropriate. And then I saw this scene, and it's definitely inappropriate. It kind of reminded me of did you ever watch Trigun?
Yeah, that's a common thing in anime. I wouldn't say Trigon quite gets there, but it does have some weird shit in it.
Well, I mean, like, just that, like, Trigon was, like, very bubbly and, like, kind of cutesy and over the top, and then there's, like, that episode near the end of the series where that one character just, like, looks into the camera and is like, I was raped.
Yeah, that's kind of a problem with anime in general, is sometimes they use the style dissonance for interesting stuff, but one thing I've seen it compared to a lot is another one, which you might know of, probably not, but called Berserk.
I know Berserk. I know that scene you're talking about in the movie, right?
Yeah, well, it's also a very long-running manga, which goes a lot longer in the movie. But yeah, there's a number of scenes. The manga actually has... It basically has an equivalent to the Goblin rape, in that there's a race of trolls who basically cause women to chest burst their trolls out of them after bad things happen. So, it gets compared to Berserk. I would say that what's happening, though, is people are seeing this anime, and frankly, they are seeing the worst parts of Berserk. The parts of Berserk that are generally really shitty and just like, oh, here's a woman, she's here to literally just add, like, grittiness. You know, like in fucking... the fucking Game of Thrones series, where just, like, you know, they throw in some rape so that Tyrion or whatever can have a background of his girlfriend getting gang raped, or, you know, like, it's just thrown in for edge, pretty much. It's thrown in to be dramatic.
Easy backstory.
Yeah, there's some stuff in Berserk that's handled very well. Not the most of it. Most of the more sexual content, frankly, isn't great. But there's a couple parts of it which actually have, like, weight behind them. The main character is actually, he's, like, a sexual assault survivor himself, and that's something that's actually, like, a main theme of the series, is that he's been damaged by that, and him, like, dealing with it, and his, like, fear of, I don't know. It's not perfect. It's also just a gory fantasy
Came out, like,
series.
88 as well, didn't it?
It's also old, yes. I believe this is based off a novel or light novel series, which are just books with, like, anime illustrations. So it might be a little older, but from what I don't know. I didn't do my research. I'm a nefarious SJW. To my knowledge, it's pretty new. The anime and manga are pretty new. I mean, the anime's brand new. I think the manga's a little older. And supposedly the novel has a little less of this in it. Supposedly it's a little better. But yeah, basically what's happening is you're getting people who are really psyched about Goblin Slayer for the worst parts of it. And the problem is it doesn't have much else in it. They talk about how it's realistic. Many characters in this area, like at one point in the first...
Realistic to what?
Well, realistic to D&D, and to just a fantasy world.
I have played a few D&D games, and, like, we have done them all without a rape.
Well, this is a thing I've noticed, man. This is part of why I wanted to talk about this, is this is a thing I'm noticing with a lot of, the weird, edgier, like, more isolated nerd boy quarters of just, nerd media, and, like, whether it's video games, animes, all that stuff, role-playing games, a lot of older role-playing game guys who talk about this. And I've talked to people who played older games, and it does seem like sometimes you play a game with somebody, and they literally are like, oh, you go to the orc camp, you find their cage full of rape victims. Like, that's a thing in some people's games. They think that's a thing that you should have when you're playing a role-playing game with your friends for fun, is you should just have, like, all of the evil bad guy races, which is another thing I want to discuss, by the way. You should have them all just habitually keep human women prisoners for sex purposes. Because in real life, the bad people do that too, Matthew. So
maybe that seems extra fucked up to me because I've always played D&D with women. And it's like, statistically, like, some of my friends, probably have been assaulted. So the idea of someone putting that in is, like, really upsetting to me. Like, oh, you find the cave of raped women. And it's like, well, now you've turned our fun fantasy into our friend, like, having to think about, like, one of the worst experiences of
well, even if it's all men, like, do you really want to go into that shit? For one, men can also be sexual assault survivors, so...
Yes.
And just in general, like, it's just gross. Like, what the fuck?
It doesn't add anything.
Like, in fantasy... I mean, the thing is, commonly in D&D especially, I think there's different thoughts about it. Ultimately, it is often about being a power fantasy, though there's a certain kind of old school thing where they're like, oh, I want to start out as a shit farmer and, like, work my way through a world of, evil, sexually devious villains who do rapes, and I want to fight them with a club until I become a knight, and... Matt, this is a bit of a digression here, but have you heard of the game Fatal?
I have not.
It's pretty infamous. Something Awful especially really dug into it and had a big fight with the creator of it forever ago. It is a game, Matthew, where you roll to determine the anal circumference of your character.
Yikes.
And the chart includes anal circumferences, and vaginal and otherwise, all the way down to babies. It is a game...
Excuse me, what the fuck?
It is a game with explicit rules for doing really horrible shit. Like anything you would imagine the rules for an anal circumference for a child would allow you to do, the game has explicit tables and charts to determine how that will turn out. So this is the endpoint of this fucking shit. Like, I'm not saying that the creators of the Goblin rape anime are playing Fatal in their spare time, but this is where it goes when you're like, yes, my fantasy world is populated with the bestial races who are always evil, and they're bad, and they screech, and they come out of the night to steal your womenfolk.
May I make an observation?
Mm-hmm.
These people who desperately want, like, sexual assault in their fantasies, I don't want to make assumptions about people, but given the climate of things, I happen to notice there's not a lot of people believe in sexual assault survivors. So it makes fantasy more realistic, but in real life, they're like, did it happen? Just an observation.
Yeah. Another thing I would say about this, I'll go back to maybe a bit more of a discussion of the anime, but while we're on this, another thing that I really dislike in anime, well, not in anime, in role-playing games and in fantasy settings, generally is the whole evil race thing. And this ties into the sexual assault. Because a lot of, racist, most, like, racist and white supremacist ideas are predicated on protect our women from the under races, right? The Mexicans want to come over and do a bunch of rape. The black people all want to, it's just... There's this whole idea that you got to defend your women. So you make a fantasy series instead where... And I think some of it's, like, a good chunk of it's probably not even particularly conscious. A lot of it is just because that's been there forever in fantasy, and it just got carried on, and, you make the evil elves, and for some reason they have dark skin. I wonder why. Yeah, and you make it so they're always more evil, but then, maybe you have a good one, but you're like, yes, their race just predicates them to evil. And that's a racist idea. Like, I don't care if you're trying to be racist with it. It is just, it's a legacy of, like, fucking, like, the olden times when we're doing phrenology and shit, is the idea that someone's species is just evil. Like, that's...
There honestly is, like, a very valid parallel there, and that's why I'm extra disappointed that the movie Bright was such a pile of shit.
Yeah, it got pretty sloppy with it. It's just like, oh, the orcs are all black people. We're going to end it at that.
Because I thought that's, like, seeing the trailer, like, oh, we're going to address it, but then it was like, no, the orcs are just black people.
Yeah, it kind of left it at that. Like, it was like, oh, here's some interesting ideas. A lot of people have made this comparison. It basically just took some of the interesting commentary from Shadowrun, which at times also has been very sloppy, and that franchise has some stuff with it too, but it took it and was as lazy with it as possible. Just, yeah. So I don't know if I really want to describe what happens too much. I feel like that's just...
I think you could leave it at there is a rape.
Yes. Okay, well, I can describe up to it, like, there's an assault that happens. The thing that really gets me about it is that it's just unnecessarily cruel. Like, you're definitely you can tell a lot about a series by where it puts its artistic effort, I think. I've noticed this in a number of anime. If I ever see a child character in an anime and I notice that, like, their legs are really, really well animated or something, I get nervous as fuck. Or, like, their feet. Like, if I see a part of a character who I don't think should be sexualized, or who just, children shouldn't be fucking sexualized, come on. If I see, like, a child suddenly seeming weirdly well drawn in areas that are frequently associated with sexiness, I get, like, oops, I'm feeling a little, oh, come on, don't do this to me. In this one,
have you seen recently that the gamers are in an uproar because Sony's censoring a game where you can molest, like, a 15-year-old Japanese schoolgirl?
Yeah, they do that every time.
Sorry, off topic, but also on topic.
Yeah, it's just their culture, Matt. The SJWs are just intolerant of other people's bad things they have in their culture.
Obviously, like, personally, I don't believe it has any merit to it, but what do you think of the conversation where, it's just a different culture?
Okay. So what I think is that it is okay to have some universal principles that you think are just okay. You should have understanding, but there's a point where you can just go, okay, in this culture, they are. I think there's a point where you mix that, like the people who are like, Islam is inherently woman hating and stuff, and like you have to be careful when doing that, because you can very quickly go to just excusing it in your own culture and just being like, Islam's where all the woman abuse is. But there are just cultures that have like a less woke thing, and there's ones that are less good about LGBT stuff, and like my values are just that, yes, the genders and sexes should generally be equal. I think any society that doesn't do that has work to do. Ideally, it would maybe be left to people who are more in it, but like you can criticize it and say that's shitty, especially since we are getting more and more of a global culture, right? Like anime and shit like that is part of my fucking culture already, because everyone I know has consumed some of it. Like it's a big product that makes it over the whole world. It's okay to go, yeah, that's shitty. You just gotta worry about when am I mixing in like some weird racial or cultural or religious, hatreds in here, or just general, bad things.
There's a difference between saying they need to do the legwork and there's saying that like this race of people are degenerates.
Yes, yeah. You can say, like, for example, Islam, pretty bad to women. Many versions of it would kill me for being trans. That's not good. But if you then go, and Muslims are all just terrorists, whoops, what have you done there?
There's
Sam Harris?
I got drunk and was shouting about Sam Harris at a party recently.
Yeah. He's a pretty clear,
he's not hiding
yeah, he's an indicator of like where, like, to me that's like when you've gone too far. That's when you've gone way too far, but yeah. And in his case, he uses it to be like lazy and not criticize his own shit, which is like, no, you can do both. Come on. But he doesn't want to, so whatever. Yeah. So, anyways, the point I was making though was in Goblin Slayer, it starts out, it's like, it's an adventuring league. Everyone's got like these ranks of adventurer. And it is very cutesy. It's very like standard anime. And it's for shock value. Like you're supposed to be like, when it turns and you get a bit of a dread kind of coming in. Like they go into the lair and there's like a skull out front and they're all like, I fought some goblins, and these are supposed to be a bunch of adventurers. Like it's like a male warrior and like a female priest, a female monk, and a lady wizard. And the lady wizard especially has a whole cutscene back to like her childhood as the attack is going on when they get ambushed by the goblins, where it's like, you're so talented and good at magic, and they show all that literally just so that she can then have her magical staff, which is presented to her in the flashback, be snapped by a little tiny goblin man in front of her after she's been stabbed by like a poison dagger, and then just so that she and her friend can then get like, I mean, I don't think she actually gets assaulted, but the monk does, and it's just yeah. Literally, like, it's just taking like glee in the humiliation of a woman, of like a woman who's supposed to be a competent adventurer, and being like, whoa, like it's really, you know, I think it's telling that it takes so much time to be like, oh, look at this cool adventurer, she sure got her ass kicked, weak woman, am I right? I'm pretty sure there are competent women later in the series, but like it's definitely a lot of like
it set a tone
victimized women there. At the end of the first episode, there's like a whole cart of like goblin rape victim women being carted off to like a monastery because their minds have been broken by the goblins. And yeah, and that's a continuing thing. The second episode, I think there's only the 2 so far, doesn't have as much explicit crap, but it definitely, you know, roughly has the same kind of thing.
That's so rough.
It's rough. It's not. It doesn't really justify itself. If you want to have serious shit like that in your series, you have to earn it. You can't just chuck it in there. But they do, and it's because they're like, you're supposed to kind of get off on it, or at least be like, frankly, it's a racist worldview. Like, as I was saying, you know, a while back now, we've gotten off track a bit. It is literally like, you know, it is like this whole fantasy of this tough guy, because the whole thing is that, for one, also no one has names, which is weird. Like the Goblin Slayer is literally always called Goblin Slayer. None of the adventurer characters even really get names. The priestess girl, who's the only one who survives, is literally just referred to as the priestess, I believe, or the cleric or whatever. And like it's this whole thing where it's like, oh, he's the tough guy who's he understands, like, all the other adventurers just want to do the cool missions, but he knows that the goblins are out there breeding, and they'll come in and steal your women, and they'll kill everyone in front of you, and there's nothing you can do when the, you know, Mexicans jump the border and their drug cartels murder you. Like, it's just it's literally just like this weird, you know, fantasy of like, I gotta defend my people, I gotta, you know, keep us safe.
It's definitely playing into the hand of people who already feel like that about, you know, minorities.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of these people go, oh, I'm not racist, but then the moment this kind of thing comes, oh, that's just a natural way to feel, you know, you're just always afraid that, like, someone who's a bit different than you might sexually victimize the women folk, or that there's like the evil drug addicts and bad criminal men, right? Like, I don't know. It's all part of a really shitty worldview, in my opinion. It's kind of why I don't like a lot of some older, like, certain kinds of fantasy or fiction in general, where it's like everyone's shit. Like, no one has any particular, like, you know, side motivations or good parts to their personality. It's just like, oh, there's just people who are bad. And, like, I sort of agree on that, but you just have them be a depthless bad person. That's boring, for one. Like, in fantasy, yeah, it's lazy. You're telling a story. You're trying to weave an interesting tale that, you know, may in some way reflect reality, but just in general is like, yeah, and it's just, it's lazy, and I think it mostly has appeal to the kind of people who have those fears, who have that kind of unexamined...
Who have a lazy worldview.
Yeah, who have an unexamined, like, worry, and you know, built from, like, racist ideas that there are people who want to do this, and who... Yeah, so whether it's, you know, it's the Muslim terrorists, or the immigrants, or the whoever, right? Like...
The Goblins.
The Goblins, yeah, the Muslim Goblins. I don't know.
Because now they could use Goblin to describe another kind of person.
Yeah, I mean, I like to call, I mean, I guess I'm dehumanizing them. So sometimes I'll refer to a particularly annoying, you know, alt-right guy or whatever as a goblin. So really, am I really any better? Horseshoe theory, Matt. Horseshoe theory.
Shit.
Okay, well, that's
That's a heavy topic to cover.
yeah, whew.
It's heavy. You gotta take a moment after and just recollect.
Yeah, no, I had to get that out. I really had this stewing ever since I encountered it. I've seen a lot of YouTubers defending this series.
Well, of course. I mean, like, they should have just left YouTube down the other day, to be honest.
I have a few that I like, or a few that I tentatively like, that do anime specifically. For a while, all the anime YouTubers seem to be really bad, and there's a couple that I'm like, oh, okay, I like the animes, and like these guys will wade through the garbage for me, and they'll tell me what's good. So I don't have to watch 70 series with the same lazy animation where, yeah, you know, women get victimized by goblins or whatever. I mean, I did that to myself today anyways, but that's how it goes sometimes.
I was watching this movie reviewer on YouTube the other day, and he was talking about this, like, Kevin Spacey movie that only made, like, $120 at the box office. And it was a really good video, and I was like, oh, wow, this is a good video. He was very in-depth and, like, to the point. I'm gonna watch some of his other stuff. Alt-writer.
Yeah. Well, I find if you're at all... I mean... If you at all like watch leftist content, YouTube will at some point be like, "Oh, would you like to see this literal white supremacist?" I think if you consume any content, YouTube eventually just decides a white supremacist might be right for you.
I genuinely think it's just because there's so much of it on YouTube that it's like you're playing the odds. Like,
honestly, there's a lot of it, and they have that shit figured out. Like, I think they seem to have kind of a good grasp on the algorithm, whether it's conscious or not.
Working on my Davis Arini video, like, my recommendation was awful for like 2 months because I did it on my like personal account.
Well, they make a shit ton of content, and they make it all very like shocking, and they, you know, get a shit ton of clicks, and like it just, yeah. I think the one I find the worst is when I'm looking at just nice, happy queer content or whatever, just standard queer content, anything. It's the worst when it's like something really kind of cute, though, or just something like, oh, here's some nice thing about my life as a queer person, or trans stuff, ew. And then, like, suddenly I have like 3 recommendations that are like, only 2 genders! Ah! And it's like, oh, good. Thanks, YouTube. Thanks for that.
I had to get a Laci Green video for my last video I did. Ugh. I skimmed through some of her stuff while I was there, and she is she's got some opinions.
She certainly does.
And the worst part is she's like advertising herself as like a sexual educator.
Well, okay, so this is a very different topic, but we can quickly... I followed the Laci thing a bit back in the day. I did actually... She was like a big part of atheist YouTube, and she apparently made her choice at some point to go to the dark side of it during the really big split. Because, well, I don't know, that whole affair was weird. Like, it was just like, oh, suddenly I'm dating this guy who frequently makes jokes about, you know, how SJWs should drink bleach, and like, he literally made videos like calling her like a fat whore, essentially. I think in nicer words than that, but pretty much like making fun of her for having sex ed videos and being a feminist. And I don't know, just poor taste in men, in my opinion, and also just like saying shitty stuff and then getting really defensive about it. Her
sounds like someone else I know.
Yeah, well, her old sex ed stuff, I watched it, like, way back in the day. She actually did some videos on trans stuff that I watched when I was first kind of figuring things out a little bit. Or before that, even, really, because she's been fairly bad for a few years now. But, you know, like, she made a big point of, like, when she discussed trans things, she'd have a trans person on. And I think she had a number of fuck-ups over the years where she would get people mad at her, and instead of going, oh, you know, this is a bit much, but maybe I did something wrong, I'll just apologize and like try and duck out from the more abusive people for now. She would then go, oh, well, trans people are just so mean. What is this? They're all so mean for some reason. Why are they all so mean to me? All of these alt-right people seem to be so nice to me.
It's the alt-right hug box is real online.
Yep. I mean, it led to her fucking, like, hugging Sargon while he apologized to her for making, like, 1,000 videos about how horrible she is.
I dislike that because anyone who can, like, know what Sargon of Akkad smells like, because... Let's be real, he drinks and he smokes, and I'm willing to make assumptions about his personal hygiene.
Smells like a proper British man, Matthew.
Like a bag of cans.
Like one of their bad food. Just some weird fish dish that someone boiled for too long.
His crotch smells like steak and kidney pie.
Okay, I'm done with this topic, thanks. But yeah, so finishing up though, basically, yeah, with Laci Green, what happened is she went more and more, she was attacked by the SJW. She did the whole thing where she made videos about, I've been, where you get the sympathy and you do the transfer where you're like, I was mistreated by the left wing. She still nominally says she's left wing. She still is like, I believe in non-binary people. I say this and this, but then she also, gives lots of attention and like cover to people like Sargon, and she does videos that say things like, in all caps, only two genders? ? And then is like, oh, I'm gonna figure out what gender is. Let's just get random dickheads off the internet to like comment on my stream or whatever, or like read Twitter comments. That's how you discover about gender, not all of the like extensive research and studies done on, alternate gender identities and alternate yeah. There's lots of science on trans people and on non-binary people even. There's a whole discipline of like gender studies for a reason. But instead she's like, let's ask Twitter. It's stupid. She's currently like training to be like a research assistant, I believe. I don't remember exactly, but yeah. Her whole thing is she loves science, and she's like, well, but on gender though, ask Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, like, if she's going to be a research assistant, she knows she can't, like, look at Twitter for this stuff, right?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. It's just, the gender's a weak point, and also, frankly, it's a thing I've noticed with a lot of right-wing YouTubers and stuff. I mean, whatever, she's not totally right-wing, but reactionary YouTubers more so, where, like, they're like, oh, what's your opinion? They let their, like, random audience just yell out their say on things, even if they don't know anything about it.
That's a big yikes from me.
Oh, yeah, no, that was... Whew, I had a lot built up there, Matt. This is something that's really annoyed me for a while, just like the weird racist undertones of a lot of fantasy. I remember like reading some earlier Pathfinder stuff where I think they've gone out of it a bit, but like Pathfinder has had a number of weird issues in that they also, like, this is the fantasy where like, and here's the Asia lands, and here's the Africa where you have the Egypt place and the dark continent full of spooky tribes. But they also had, before I knew anything about the weird stuff they have regarding, Africa is either Egypt or a bunch of spooky tribes, they had a number of books, and I think they still keep most of this lore. I remember some of their earlier books on like the differences of their monsters. I will say happily, I don't believe their goblins do rapes. The goblins in Pathfinder are really more about being like murder minions. They're just like quirky, and they sing songs about eating dogs and using garbage to make swords. But they had their ogres, and their ogres are inbred rapist cannibals who live in the woods and in like caves, and they kidnap women, and they make half ogre children, and they have sex with their sisters, and that was a common thing I noticed with a number of races, is they included the weird, like, they're like, oh, time to put sex into this. Like, no thanks. No thanks, Pathfinder. Doesn't really make it that much more mature for me. I'd rather my ogres were just like large, muscly guys trying to shake me down for money on a road with a log. I'm cool if they're simpler than that.
It's weird there's like this history of discrimination in like these weird tabletop games, because I remember hearing like one of the first editions of D&D, if you chose like female for your character, that was you lost like a bunch of stats like intelligence and strength.
I believe it was just, I don't know, maybe in the very first. I know that in AD&D, Gygax, his whole forward of it is like, oh, we won't be like other games which are overly fiddly and da-da-da. We won't have differences in male and female strength. But then immediately is like, women have a lower strength cap. And I believe that's all they had from AD&D onwards. I've never really looked at the very first D&D. A lot of old games, it was a thing, and that's why he mentioned it, to frequently be like, women have a higher charisma score because they're hotter. That was a pretty freaking house rule I've heard of, is that people would be like, women are hot, so their charisma's higher. Because they're just sexier to everyone.
Do you think that's just because it was something that's been dominated by like weird white nerds for so long?
Yes, that is why. And even before that, you had like a lot of earlier fantasy was written by like weird religious shut-ins, like, you know, the cosmic horror of like Lovecraft and Conan, and like Conan was very like lots of, you know, bestial races and things, and everyone, yeah, I mean, Lovecraft was a racist. Was a horrible racist.
Of course.
He would write about the evil fish races and literally just real races that exist and describe them as being awful and alien, and so it's just been a thing in fantasy, like since the more modern version of it has arisen in the last 100 or 200 or, you know, whatever years. I would say mostly in the last about 100 years. The more modern version of like myths and stuff being turned into fantasy novels and stories, and then into role-playing games and such. Was largely steered by various kinds of weird white guy, and most of those weird white guys were, by necessity, dosed in a certain amount of racism and white supremacy and creepy bullshit. Because that was just kind of how it was. So yeah, of course it has a bunch of weird hang-ups. But a lot of people like ignore those, and if you mention them, they're like, "Oh, it's just a game, man. Who cares if the the elves are all evil and they happen to be black for some reason?"
Progress is unimportant.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll go along with an olden style role playing game sometimes, and like I don't think that if you play them or enjoy them, you're bad. It's just you should acknowledge that it's like regressive, shitty stuff. On some level. Like, you can even like something that's kind of progressive and shitty. I like that Berserk anime we were talking about, and I will say that there's some pretty regressive, shitty stuff in that. There's a lot of reasons I wouldn't recommend it to anybody because of that. It has gorgeous art, it has some really interesting arcs, but yeah, it has fucking some garbage in it, and that's just how it is.
I mean, like, you can like problematic things. That's, like, part of life. But you don't get to then defend, like, the problematic parts of it. That's where you run into problems.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty rare that anybody who's commenting on the social aspects of a thing is, like, actually wanting to ban that sick filth. Especially if they're actually a big nerd themselves. They're more just going, hey, this is why this is shitty, and, like, future work should probably involve less of this. Right? Like, it's a
learning process.
Yeah, and it's just developing things and making them, you know, frankly, a lot of it is just incorporating a wider amount of human experience, like making it so that fantasy series aren't just about like dudes going off to defend their women and save the princess and fight the evil sub-races, is literally just including the experiences of other fucking people. There's so many other kinds of life than being like a racist white guy.
I mean, like, personally, I do want to take away all their fantasy and the things they like. I would love to take everything nerds away from them. Nothing would make me happier.
The only game will be Gone Home.
I'll be able to finally cash those George Soros bucks.
There we go.
That's a real agenda. I need Anita Sarkeesian to send me a bag of money.
Yeah, we're all games will be gone home, and the game ideas of Anita Sarkeesian exclusively. She had a couple game ideas, and those will be allowed to.
You'll pop a game into your Xbox, and it'll just be a feminist frequency video.
Yeah. So moving on to your topic here, Matt. I didn't really mention it because we got so fired up, just blazing ahead there. But yeah, you've been having a time on the internet lately.
I am on fire on Twitter. If anyone doesn't follow @Brienne and Matt, you can see what it's all about.
Yeah, knowing the current audience, it'll probably mostly be people from the Discord. But hey, if there's anyone else, hello, go watch Brienne and Matt. It's lovely. He is also mean to nerds.
Jay has known me for very, very long, and they also know that one of the things I am best at is getting people upset. And this is transferred over to my online presence, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Matt is trying to ride the coattails of the internet famous in order to make millions.
Well, there's a specific YouTuber who has had some nuclear takes that is not too happy with me these days.
Yeah, no, you might have done a couple things, you know.
But I was nice. I was polite. I was nicer than I normally am.
You've been pretty good. Like you've been relatively civil about it. You were just free speeching. So
I'm just using my free speech. But here's the thing: like when you have an online presence and like a huge audience and a huge reach, you retweet a Nazi, you don't get to say how that's the left's fault and how they're, you got to take responsibility. Nobody needs an inventory of like all the good deeds you've done. Just apologize and move on.
By the way, for those who don't know, what we're talking about is Boogie. Matt has been having some internet chats with Boogie from the YouTube.
I get under his skin. I don't know why he hates me so much.
It might be the videos where you tell him to shut the fuck up, but
that was just solid advice.
Yeah, honestly, I think that video is pretty tame. I think that's actually not a particularly mean video for what you could say to him. So,
I mean, like, here are my final thoughts on it. Like, I just don't care that much. I don't have a horse in this race. Like, this is his job, though. Like, if he wants to retweet Nazis and say all this stuff, this is his career, and he needs to understand that. And he also needs to understand that when he has a huge platform, he needs to be able to deal with pushback when he does stuff like this. And don't retweet someone with Nazi imagery and then get upset that people are like, why did you retweet someone with Nazi imagery? What do you think people need to take away from this? Like Goblin Slayer and all this stuff going on.
Well, for Goblin Slayer, they should take away don't watch it. It's bad. It's just bad. It has some moments of okay animation, but that's not really a reason to put up with anything in it. But in terms of just like all this, I'd say it is perfectly acceptable to point out when there's some weird racist shit in your media. You can like something that has some weird implications in it and still watch it, but acknowledge that it's got garbage in it. I don't know if I'm gonna include Goblin Slayer. If you like Goblin Slayer, you're trash. That's my verdict. If you like Goblin Slayer, you were a bad person. You should go to prison. It's my official verdict.
That's the part that's gonna end up on the SJW cringe compilation.
Oh yeah, there we go. Sweet. All people who like Goblin Slayer are bad. Anyone who likes the parts of Berserk that I think are bad is bad. They are a objectively bad person. I think there a lot of people when they talk about like fantasy and stuff, they talk like it's all just like creativity is just like this magical mind box that like just everything springs from nothing and there's no connection to like real society and to the problems and general, the shit that's happening, there's no connection to reality there. It's just, oh yeah, we just came up with this fun idea where you go into a dungeon and use a sword to murder a bunch of goblins or whatever. It's just fantasy, dude. It's just some stuff I thought up out of nowhere. And it's like, no, nothing, like creativity is always just a process of taking some things that you've seen, mixing them with some other things, and you can have a pretty varied mix of things, and they can be less related to what you're creating than other things you could have used, but in the end, it is just you are taking things that are part of our reality and that you have seen, and you're making them into other things via combination and little shifts and different takes on it and on formulas and ways of telling stories. And when you can that is going to include some fucking bullshit and literally crazy old race theories like that. I would say a lot of fantasy, unfortunately, has that as a thing, and that's something to work on. If you want to make a fantasy setting, if you want to, even if just for your your D&D game, your role playing game, maybe think about is this something that H.P. Lovecraft would thumbs up to? Maybe I should change this bit a little. Maybe I shouldn't have the bad people who are dark-skinned and who, maybe in this world anyone can be good. But yeah, so this I think we'll play out here. I don't have anything else to shill because I haven't even done an episode of this for months. But Matt, sorry, no, let's cut that out. But Matt,
you're trying to dox me?
You can do a bleep for that, maybe.
Of course.
Yeah. You can bleep that out with something. You're at least you're defended against my doxing attempts because you have ultimate say over this. So yeah, what are you doing on the internet, Matt? Do you want to plug stuff?
Follow my YouTube, Brianna Matt, or follow me on Twitter at Brianna Matt, where I make nerds upset regularly. Matt's
also got a Discord, which you'll find on his YouTube channel. I'm on there too. So
please post Garfield porn.
Yeah, it's very important. That's an important part of the Discord, is Garfield erotica.
It's required.
Okay, so, yeah, that was yet another episode of Destroy All Nerds. The nerds are all destroyed now. They're gone. You're welcome. And,
thanks, everybody.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.